St. Lucia is known for its stunning natural beauty, as well as an abundance of flora and fauna. However, the island's natural resources are coming under increasing pressure. All of our major industries, including tourism, agriculture, fishing, and construction, depend upon the sustainable use of our natural resources. To help preserve those limited assets, St. Lucia has implemented a program for economic and agricultural diversification and poverty reduction through integrated natural resource management. This was funded by the European Commission under the Special Framework of Assistance 2003 at a cost of 32 million EC dollars. One of the main components of this initiative is the 14 million EC dollar Environmental Management Fund, which is managed by the Banana Industry Trust. I'll be back in just a moment with an in-depth look at how this money is being spent to benefit the lives of all St. Lucians.
The actions of one. Can change life as we know it for all. Before you act, think about what you do and whom you are doing it to. Conserve our natural resources. Protect our livelihood.
Over the past 3 years, a number of scientists from around the world visited the island to undertake 6 environmental projects. We will now take a closer look at each of these projects and examine how they affect the social and economic framework of St. Lucia. Persistent problems of land degradation in many of the island's key watersheds have highlighted the need for sustainable land management practices.
This is especially so in the agricultural and construction industries. Building and farming on steep slopes have caused increased sedimentation of waterways and the dwindling of the island's water resources. Unsustainable practices have also resulted in the loss of productivity in cultivated areas and increased incidence of land slippage. The National Action Plan to combat desertification and drought was developed specifically to reverse those trends.
This came about because St. Lucia signed UNCCD convention, and one of the mandates of signatories to that convention is to develop a national action plan that seeks to deliver land management or land degradation and drought. So from that perspective, the Ministry of Agriculture, through the Forestry Department, where the focal point is, we took up the responsibility to develop a national action plan and also a strategic action plan.
The National Action Plan to combat desertification and drought will furnish key stakeholders with vital information. This will allow them to make informed decisions on the management of the country's resources. It also allows for all agencies to adopt a more holistic approach when monitoring the impacts of developments on the island.
The forestry policy is another initiative that has come on stream during the financial year. And what this policy seeks to do is look at the forestry sector. Our previous policy looked at the department. All right, it was not broad-based. This new policy seeks to look at a sector. We're looking at a subsector or a sector that we call the forestry sector. Now, the knapsack is directly linked because when you talk forestry, you're talking about land management, you're talking about natural resource management. And for presently, we are practicing land management, but more from a conservative, protective standpoint with our forest reserves. And what we are saying now, with the knapsack coming in, various components of management, for example, agroforestry systems can come into play, where persons now can be allowed to cultivate within forest reserves on particular slopes and particular types, practicing agroforestry, where you're going to have trees and agricultural crops and still have your water system in place.
The Forestry Department and the Ministry of Physical Development and National Mobilization aim to expand St. Lucia's protected forest reserve. As such, a number of lands adjacent to the reserves will be incorporated into the protected areas.
However, these lands must first be surveyed and acquired by the Crown. In order for this to happen, the boundaries of St. Lucia's 19,000-acre forest reserve must first be clearly demarcated.
The forest demarcation is a project that stems way back, maybe 5 years ago. And why that project came about is because after Tropical Storm Debbie, we found that many of our boundary lines were lost because Tropical Storm Debbie brought in a lot of rain, and many boundary lines were lost because of existence on steep slopes. And we were having problems identifying these lines which were bordering with private lands. So we have lost pegs. So we conceived that project many years ago, and it's only until the EU project came into effect, SFA 2003, we were able to materialize it. Another reason for this is that we were trying to include additional lands, new forested crown lands, into the reserve. Because by law, a smaller island like St. Lucia or any country should have at least 20 to 25% of its land under forest to protect your water resources. And as it is, we only had about 10.1 to 11% of our area. So with these new lands, we're hoping that we could have about almost 15 or 16% of forest reserve.
The National Forest Demarcation and Biophysical Resource Inventory also included an assessment of the forest's trees, animals, and birds. As part of this assessment, the quality, quantity, and distribution of various types of trees were examined.
One of the most interesting things we've found at the moment is that the previous inventory in 1982 showed that the forests in St. Lucia had about 200 cubic metres of forest per hectare, and currently we're finding it's 300 cubic metres per hectare, which means 50% recovery from hurricanes and so on between 1982 and 2009.
The biodiversity inventory included an entomological inventory, that is an inventory of all insects that is found in St. Lucia forest, that is wild. In fact, not just limited to the forest, but on the edge of the forest as well. We have a reptile and amphibian inventory, a forest bird inventory, vegetation classification and vegetation type inventory, and also updating of the herbarium in St. Lucia Forest Herbarium, which is located in the Forestry Department headquarters at Union. There was also a mammal inventory.
Until now, St. Lucia's rainforests have never been subjected to a comprehensive inventory. To date, only 4 inventories have been conducted in St. Lucia. The first was in 1942 and the last in 1982. These sporadic exercises have been highly inadequate. Taking regular inventory is the most effective means for gathering important information on the resources available in our forests.
We are able to find out the status of one of the reptile, which is the fedilans. That is really endangered. We didn't know that the agouti, which is a mammal, that it was introduced to St. Lucia. All the time we thought it was a species that was indigenous to the island. We got to find out a lot more species that are endemic to the island. So that is a very important thing so that we can develop management plans to conserve